Skype lessons, do they really work? And more importantly, how do I go about doing them? So this is an episode I've been planning to do for a while, but current events have pushed it to the forefront. I'd actually planned to do a look at a piece of music that I just published a music video of, All a Turka Jazz, fantastic piece, lots of good stuff to say about that. But that will take place on another episode, because at this point in time, March 17th, 2020, we're dealing worldwide with the coronavirus, and for many music teachers and music students, you're looking at doing Skype lessons for the first time, or Facetime, or some sort of video lessons. And it's something I've been doing for almost as long as I've been doing Harp Tuesday, so almost 10 years. And they work great. They're fantastic. I love doing them. And so I thought I would, first of all, just give you some practical advice on how to go about setting up to do Skype lessons. And then towards the end, talk about a little bit about the differences between in-person and online lessons. And the good news is that it's pretty easy to do, and you don't need to have the perfect setup or the perfect equipment. So first of all, at the very worst, you can use your phone, right? It's not great because the screen is going to be small. It's going to be hard for you to see your students. But in the pinch, it'll work. It's got a built-in microphone. It's got a built-in webcam. Great. So the better option would be to have some sort of tablet. So that will give you potentially a bigger screen, a bigger viewing area with which to see. And then the best option would be to have a laptop or a desktop computer with a webcam. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, most of what I'm going to be talking about is applicable to any sort of Skype music lessons, but specifically for harp, I just want to talk about how I prefer to set up. So here's the harp. Here's a music stand, sort of getting as close to the harp as you can. And then I would like to set up my tablet or laptop or phone or desktop just to the left of the music stand. So approximately right where you guys are watching me. And that to me gives a good view of the hands and the face, and it's a pretty good option. Now, if you're using a tablet or a phone, you'll deal with the problem of how to get it in position. So of course you'll want to be, this direction rather than this direction. And you can get potentially a tablet holder, right? Because this, like I can balance this way, right? But it means the angle, if I'm putting this on something, say maybe I've got a chair with a bunch of boxes on top of it or something to hold this up here, it's going to be hard, as you can see, to get the angle that I would like, which might be more upright or maybe even tilted towards me a little bit. So you may need to get some sort of a holder, you may need to jury rig things. This is one of the advantages of a laptop, because again, you can set it up on something right here, get it to the height you would like, and the laptop, you can adjust the lid to the angle that seems most appropriate. We'll talk about webcams in a moment, but I'm just going to talk about, I think, one of the best things you can do, and something you'll probably have lying around, is to use headphones during the lesson. So they don't have to be great. These are cheap little $10 headphones. This is a pair of Sennheiser headphones, which got on sale. I think they were probably, $40 or something like that. They've seen better days, but they work. I use these because they're quite light. Even though I have more expensive headphones, they're just, in terms of using them for a long time, I'm happy to use these, which are just quite light and comfortable. I like to just put them over my left ear and have my right ear available to hear the harp. And also that way can you see this? Yeah, this part then is not banging into the harp. It's just tucked out of the way. Of course, if you're using your, earpods or whatever, you can just have them in the left ear potentially, or in both ears. And there are a couple of advantages to using headphones. One is the sound quality may be better than using whatever speaker setup you have. You may be able to hear things more clearly and isolate what you're hearing more easily. And also there's no chance of feedback. In other words, when the sound, so say your student plays something, it comes through, if it comes out the speakers, there's a chance that your microphone will pick that up and transmit it back to your students, or vice versa. And again, many of my students don't wear headphones. I feel that software and maybe also the hardware has gotten better over the years, and I rarely hear feedback, but it's quite annoying to hear yourself speaking, right? So you say something and then you start to hear that come back at a slight delay, or you play something and it comes back. So headphones just eliminates that as a problem, and it's something you probably have lying around, so I would definitely experiment with those. You may find that you don't want to use them and that it's fine, but it's an easy thing to do. Pay attention to the background. Obviously, something like this, a white background is ideal, or just a plain background is ideal, something that's not too busy. But the most important thing is not to be backlit. So you don't want to have a window right here with light coming in behind you. You want to have light coming from behind the camera towards you, ideally, right? So that the light, you may, if it's a room where you can read music easily, you're probably good, right? But that's just something to be aware of, and something that, again, you can probably jury rig anything some lights that you have around if you feel the lighting's not good enough, but you want it shining towards you and not from behind you. So there are some things you can sort of bonuses, I would say. So again, you could do a lesson with your phone. For a long-term solution, I don't think it's great. I feel I have some students that do take lessons on their phone. It just means it's hard to see. Now, remember, if I'm using my phone, you might be using a monitor and might have a huge screen. So what you're seeing is dependent on the quality of my webcam, but not on the size of my screen. So I could be Skyping with this phone, and you could be seeing a great clear picture. It's not going to affect the picture my student's going to see, per se, but it's going to affect how well I can see them, right? Because I'm looking at this tiny little screen. So ideally, you're going to get something bigger. If you're using a laptop, and certainly if you're using a desktop, you have the option of not just using the built-in webcam, but you have an option of getting an external webcam. Again, it's not essential, but for sort of long-term, if this is something you plan to do in the long term, I think it's an excellent thing to get. So I've always used Logitech webcams. This is the Logitech 920, which is it's not the very most recent version. You don't need to worry about trying to get a 4K webcam, because the bandwidth, the information in the internet connection between you and the person you're Skyping with, at this point in time, we can't reliably stream 4K. Also, your computing device, whether it's a tablet, a computer, or a phone, and theirs may not be able to handle that quality of that amount of information. But being able to stream in 1920 by 1080 full HD is great and gives you a nice picture quality. So something like this is great, and it's two advantages to a webcam. One is potentially the increased picture quality, and especially cheap entry-level PC laptops generally have very bad webcams, so it'll improve the picture quality. And the other advantage is it makes it easy to pick it up and move it around and say, okay, here's a close-up look at my hands doing this or that or whatever, right? That is one of the advantages of the phone, is that it's also the most portable in terms of maneuvering it around to a different position. But webcam is great. Something to consider if this is something you're going to do more regularly. A monitor. So if you're using a laptop, you don't need a monitor. If you're using a desktop, you will. But even if you're using a laptop, you might consider, again, if this is something you're doing quite a bit, setting up an external monitor plugged into the laptop. So you could have, in my case, I've got a 24-inch monitor. So then you can see things really quite well. And remember, even if your students are using their phone, it doesn't matter. It's the quality of the webcam that they're using and the quality of the connection, but you'll be able to see things blown up, as it were, on the big screen. It just aids your ability to see. Sound. So of course you can use the built-in microphone on whatever device you're using, whether it be the internal microphone. Webcams will have a microphone on them as well. You can improve the sound by using some, for example, by using a USB microphone. And there's a dizzying array of options out there, right? Again, if you're just doing this in response to the coronavirus and you're just starting up and trying to experiment with this, don't worry about getting an external microphone right at the moment. Even in the best case, if you are transmitting the best case audio, there's also the quality of your connection and then the quality of your students' headphones and their device and everything. So there's a lot of ways for the signal to degrade, and it's going to be good enough even with kind of crappy audio. But it is something to consider, and I've used various different options over the years. But what I would like to recommend to you at the moment would be to consider getting a portable recorder. So I have, for example, a Zoom H5, which I use for all my outdoor recordings. I use it for a lot of my videos, music videos, or performance videos that aren't filmed in Victoria. Were probably recorded with this. And you can plug this in via USB cable into your laptop or desktop and use it as an external microphone. So the advantage of getting this rather than just a specific USB microphone is it's also a recording device and something you can use on location, that you can record directly to this. You don't have to plug it into a secondary device to record. And it's something that's quite likely worth having if you don't already, this option. Now, this is Zoom. This is an H5, which in Canada, Long McQuaid currently sells it for $400. Zoom makes an H1N, which Long McQuaid I think has for $160. I'm happy with the quality of this H5. It's got excellent quality. The cheaper option might be great. Tascam also makes some portable recorders, so something to investigate depending on your budget. But again, just some potential things. So use what you have at the moment. Try to get a bigger screen. Try to get the biggest screen possible. So whether that's a tablet or a laptop or a monitor. Try to have headphones. And then, as a bonus, think about an external webcam if needed. And again, something like an Apple device, so whether it's a MacBook or an iPad, they have pretty good webcams already. And consider an external microphone as potentially sort of the last step in that chain of upgrading. Okay, great. So that's the sort of the hardware setup. Then what about internet connection? And here again, I feel that since when I started doing Skype lessons, in general, people have better internet connections now around the world. It's pretty amazing, right? To be able to Skype. I'm in Victoria, BC, in Canada, west coast of Canada. To be Skyping with Australia or Europe, or China or Indonesia, and for the most part, have very good connections, even halfway around the world. So the you can go to a website called speedtest.net, for example, and run a test on your internet connection to see what speed you're getting. Skype recommends having a 1.5 Mbps connection, both download and upload, in order to stream full HD. So that, for most connections, the download is not going to be the limiting factor. You're going to be able to download the information fast enough. It's the upload, so the sending of information, certainly in Canada, tends to be a lot slower than the download. Depending on your location, that may vary. 1.5 Mbps is fairly slow. Most connections should have it, but if you don't, that's a problem. Of course, you also want to check the ping, just to check to make sure there's kind of no lag spikes. You're connecting and then you're not, and you're connecting and you're not. Wired is the most reliable. If you can connect an Ethernet cable to your laptop or desktop from your router or modem, that's fantastic. It's going to get you your most reliable connection. If you're on Wi-Fi, try to stay as close to your router as you can. If that's not possible, consider a Wi-Fi extender, or potentially upgrading your modem or router. Modem, I guess. If you're worried about your internet connection, make sure you're not running any other programs in the background that also are connecting and transmitting information to the internet. And in general, if you're using an older, say, laptop, trying to close any extra programs, though most modern computing devices will be able to run Skype without a problem. Okay, programs. So I'm mentioning Skype, but of course there are other options. So Skype, Zoom, and Facetime are the three most common that you'll hear at this point in time in 2020. And Facetime, one of them is not like the other, so Facetime is only for Apple products. For me, the only way I could Facetime somebody would be with my iPad, because I have a PC and Android phone. And that means even if you use Facetime, and I use my iPad for sheet music, so during lessons, so I don't offer Facetime lessons except in an emergency. If you offer Facetime lessons, if that's your primary way of teaching, you might as well have Zoom and or Skype installed as well, because not everyone is going to have an Apple device. Skype or Zoom, I use Skype just because that's what I've always used. That's all my contacts are. I have Zoom installed. I use it on occasion. Sometimes people run into problems with Skype and we'll try Zoom. Because I don't use Zoom all the time, I haven't had the case where somebody runs into problems with Zoom and we use Skype, but I'm sure that occurs as well. My feeling is all these programs are basically equal. FaceTime is often sort of thought of or touted as it's better. Oh, I tried them all and FaceTime was the best. My feeling is that's simply because by requiring two Apple devices, and because Apple devices have good webcams and good microphones and like good, fairly fast or well optimized processing, you eliminate the hardware aspect where people using a really outdated laptop or using a laptop with a really bad webcam. And so that is why people say, oh, FaceTime was so much better. It's just because of the hardware and not the software. So as long as you have good hardware, it doesn't really matter what device or what program you're using. They're all free, so install them, use them. If you like one better than the other, great. Just remember that FaceTime is only going to be available to your students who have an Apple device. What else? So I mentioned using this for sheet music. So unless you're teaching by ear, you'll want to have a copy of the music that your students are playing in front of you, because normally in-person lessons, somebody brings the music. They come to the lesson, they bring their music, great, put it on the music stand, perfect. When I first started doing Skype lessons, I would have folders of everybody's music. It is a little annoying because what if you've got a piece that several people are playing, or a book that somebody's playing music from this piece from this book and somebody else is playing a different piece from that book? How do you organize it all? And when I went to Europe for 2 months in 2015, I guess, that's when I bought this iPad, which is an iPad Air 2, to be able to have all my music in Fourscore, and I've talked about this before. And it is fantastic for Skype lessons because I can create a playlist for each student and I can put all the pieces they're playing on there, and I don't need to worry about swapping between students. I just open up the playlist, there's all that music, boom. It's just a fantastic option. But again, if this is if you imagine this being a short-term thing and you don't have some sort of tablet that you could view PDFs on, it's probably going to be cheaper just to print out a few things and juggle folders or whatnot for students. If you're thinking more long-term and you're looking for a good excuse to buy a tablet and don't have one already, hey, great. Again, I think it's just a fantastic way to organize things. One question people might have is, okay, well, what about notes on the music? So you can, of course, ask your students to make sure that they have pencils and highlighters, whatever else you want, ready to write down the notes. You can, on Fourscore at least, or in paper for sure, but you can write the notes down yourself and then hold it up, right? Hold it up for them to see and transfer over. You can also potentially send them a copy of the annotated PDF or a scan of the notes that you've written. just depends. For me, it's not been a big deal, but I don't tend to write a lot of notes anyway. And yeah. And again, I guess that's my overall message would be, it's easy, right? It's easy. It's going to be easy. What else? Just one more practical thing, and that is payment. If you're looking at doing this for non-local students, right, where say paying by check or cash is not a possibility, PayPal is the most recognizable option. There's also companies like Square and Stripe that allow payment through credit card, depending on where you live in the region. There's also bank transfers as a possibility within Europe. I think that's very common. Here in Canada, we have something called an e-transfer, which is bank-to-bank transfer only for within Canada. So I use that for my Canadian students, but for everybody else, I send a PayPal invoice, and they can pay that with any credit card or with a PayPal account. Okay, so now let me talk about differences. And originally, when I had thought of this episode, this was what I was going to start with, because it's funny. I think for a lot of people, maybe there's this thought that a Skype lesson it's new and weird and I don't know, it can't be as good as a in-person lesson. And I was going to lead with talking about some of the differences. But of course, this coronavirus situation has certainly highlighted the huge advantage of Skype lessons, which is if they're the only option, then they're definitely the best option, right? So what are the differences? Well, no physical adjustments are possible, right? That's sort of the most obvious one. You can't reach out and say, no, move that, move this, oh, watch that. And that, for some people, of course, might drive you crazy. If you're the type of person who is constantly offering physical adjustments, this is going to be a big learning curve. If you never offer physical adjustments, no learning curve. So you have to be quite verbal, but you can demonstrate, right? So it's great. And again, if you have, say, a webcam or pick up your tablet or phone or whatever, move it closer, you can do a nice close-in zoomed look, and you can demonstrate and you can talk people through and try and say, oh, no, turn the hand a little bit more this way, point the fingers this way, blah, 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 blah. It obviously, the more that a student is able to be physically aware of their own body, right, and to process these instructions that you're giving them, the easier it will be. So this is where I don't have a lot of experience with teaching very young children on Skype, and that would be a hesitancy that, yes, in a pinch, it's maybe possible, but it's not ideal, I think. But for teens and adults, it's great, right? You should be able to get by with these demonstrations and verbal adjustments. Something else that's different is you can't play, at least with current technology, you can't play duets together. There's too much of a delay. You can feel like you're in sync for one person, but it won't be in sync for the other one. Or maybe I can hear you, but you can't hear me. And again, potentially, if you're in the same city and you both have fantastic connections and great processing power and whatnot, maybe. But on the whole, that's something, a dream for the future, right? So no duets, but also no clapping rhythms together, right? Or clap along as someone's playing, or have them play along with you to try to groove something. So that can be frustrating. And again, depends on your style of teaching, and it might be a big adjustment or it might be no adjustment at all. Little things, of course, also, you can't point to somewhere on the music. You have to verbally say, second line, fourth bar, third beat, or whatever. You just describe it or play it. And of course, the sound and the visuals, in general, they're not going to be as good as being there in person. Sometimes, actually, maybe you get a better visual, or the angle is better or whatnot. But in general, I think and certainly for the sound, it's going to be, no matter what the setup, it's going to be a little bit better if you were in person. And of course, this is in the best case scenario. You can do what you can to have a good setup and a great internet connection. But chances are there are going to be some lags and blips, and so you just have to have patience with that when it happens, and to just roll with that, right? Now, there are some pluses, however. Students can use their own harp, and which is a plus and a minus, because it's great to be able to play on other harps, and it's good practice as well especially if you're looking to perform, to get a little bit disoriented or a little bit just unfamiliar, playing an unfamiliar spot on a harp that's not your own. But it's also can be really nice for this teacher to hear a student play on a harp that is their own and see their setup and maybe notice, oh, you're singing too high or singing too low in a different way, or the angle of the harp, or to hear their harp. And for the student, it just means, of course, there's always that sense of, well, I played it better at home, right? And here the student gets to play in the comfort of their familiar circumstances, setup. So potentially they're able to have a better experience. And again, from a performance standpoint, it's great to be able to have that little bit of mini performance in an unfamiliar situation. So pluses and minuses, but on the whole, I think students being able to use their own harp without having to move it is a plus. Another big plus is being able to immediately be able to demonstrate on your own instrument, right? So I don't know about you, but for me, my experience learning the harp was, there was one harp, and when my teacher wanted to demonstrate something, she would either reach out, with the left hand, or we would switch places, which is fine. But I really love being able to just immediately tilt the harp back and demonstrate something. And so these days, even in person, whenever possible, I try to have a harp set up for myself as well as for my students. So that's a plus. And then, of course, the scheduling convenience is amazing, right? Because there's no traffic to get stuck in, no travel time to worry about. Lessons start right on time and can finish right on time, right? There's no, from a scheduling standpoint, that it's just amazing. And of course, convenience, both for you and for your students, is also amazing. The no travel time, and yeah, just fantastic that way. And of course, one other big plus that we're all aware of right at the moment is you can't get each other sick. So you can teach and be sick and not feel guilty, and your students can have a lesson when they're not 100% and not worry about getting you sick. So hey, that's great. So for myself, and again, I do probably 75-80% Skype lessons in normal times, right? A lot of Skype lessons. And I think in person, of course, is I say of course, but maybe not, but I think in-person lessons are slightly better for the lesson itself. But I would say 95%, the vast majority of the time, I'm not aware when I'm teaching a lesson, whether it's Skype or in person. It's just a lesson. Every once in a while, right, so one of these little frustrations might occur, and I might think, oh, I wish that this was an in-person lesson. But it's a very small, it's not a big, huge difference. And then, of course, the logistical aspects are a huge plus for Skype lessons. And so, for example, I have a local student who chooses to have Skype lessons instead of coming in person, because she's not super local, a little bit of a drive, but I mean, just for Victoria, it's half an hour, 40 minutes, something, I don't know. But that's an example of someone where, yes, maybe that in-person lesson might be that tiny bit more effective, potentially, but it's not enough to outweigh all that travel time and the convenience of being able to play on your own harp without bringing it, all that. So, I think Skype lessons are a fantastic thing, especially for an instrument like the harp, where you may not have anybody local in your area. And of course, also just a way to be able to work with whoever you want around the world is an amazing thing. So, yeah, I encourage you to have fun. Again, I guess the big takeaway with this, whether you're teaching Skype lessons for the first time or whether you're taking lessons through Skype for the first time, is it'll work. It's great. It's, work out some stumbling blocks potentially, but it's not that hard. And I hope you have fun with that. And I think I will close with a link to some Bach to kind of enjoy in these uncertain times. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found that useful. I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.